I think we'll go ahead and get started. Welcome, everybody. Thank you for joining us today for this webinar hosted by the Palmer Museum of Art. I'm Brandy Breslin. I'm the Director of Education at the Palmer. This is an artist talk with Linda Stein. She's a permanent collection, an artist in our permanent collection, and also featured in one of our special exhibitions. The talk was originally scheduled to take place in the galleries. Unfortunately, Linda got sick and wasn't able to travel, but fortunately, perhaps she's starting to mend and able to be with us today virtually. So we're grateful to be able to gather together virtually and listen to this talk, spend some time with artist Linda Stein. A note that this talk will be recorded and we will share and post the recording afterwards. A couple of notes about the webinar business before we really get started. I wanted to call your attention to the closed captioning options. This is something that each of you can turn on individually on your own at the bottom of your Zoom screen. You can click the show captions button in order to turn that on. Additionally, if you'd like to put questions in, we have the Q&A box. You can find that menu at the bottom of the Zoom bar as well. And I'll be monitoring throughout the talk for questions that we'll pose at the end. A little note about this talk and it being part of the exhibition, Profiles of Vulnerability and Protection. This is a current exhibition in the Palmer's Barbara and Lee Maiman Teach-In Gallery. It's a project that was organized by the museum in collaboration with a guest curator, Karen Kiefer Boyd, who's professor of art education and women, gender, and sexuality studies. She's a member of the panel today. Profiles of Vulnerability and Protection explores how people navigate vulnerability, perhaps as connected through personal identities, environments, and labor, and how we really might discover how to create a strength or a protection through those vulnerabilities. The exhibition features several works by our guest, Linda Stein, and we're hoping to hear more about those works in our permanent collection and about more of her work as well. Linda Stein's a feminist artist, an activist, an educator, and a writer. And at this point, we'd like to introduce her more formally, and I'm going to turn the microphone over to my colleague, Karen Kiefer Boyd, for that. Thank you. Karen, we'll need to go back because you're on mute.
Okay, I'm off mute now. I want to introduce Linda Stein, and I thought I'd do so by showing some images. Can I open up, can I share the screen? Is that possible? There we go. Yeah. Okay, right here. Let's do it this way here. I think I'm not sharing the screen here. Just a moment. That one. Okay, so what I have am showing here is Linda Stein's website, and I think it's really worthwhile to spend some time with it. There's videos, there's her art and her different series. But just to introduce a little bit about Linda Stein, many in this group here had a chance to actually see her art at the Palmer Museum, and we will visit again there on April 10th. Linda Stein is a feminist artist, activist, educator, and writer. She's a founding president of the nonprofit Have Art Will Travel for Courageous Kindness, and that's the subheading. It's really important, which addresses bullying and diversity. The acronym HAWT, or Have Art Will Travel, featured the exhibition, The Fluidity of Gender, sculpture by Linda Stein, and it traveled to more than 30 museums from 2010 to 2020. Linda Stein is in so many museum collections. I think it totals, I'm just switched to this page, it's somewhere around 60, possibly more permanent collections, TV and movie appearances, so much more. And we are so pleased to have Linda. I'm just like scrolling backwards through here. You can see through the years here and all the different places. I do hope you will spend time visiting this site. With that, I'm so honored and pleased to have Linda Stein begin with her presentation, Below the Eyes, and I will stop sharing here for you to do so.
Am I on speaker? Can you all hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
Oh, terrific. So my thanks first to Karen, who is honestly, truly an exceptional teacher, and to Brandy and all the wonderful folks at Penn State. And thanks also to Rachel, Anna Marie, Henry, Meredith, my team, who also works with the nonprofit I started way back in I think it was the 17th century, or, well, actually maybe a half century ago in 1972, called Have Art Will Travel. And it aims, as Karen said, for courageous kindness in this oh so difficult world. In my half-hour presentation today, let me give you an idea of what growing up was like for me in the 1940s and 1950s. I'm now 81 years old, so that was more than half century ago, a time much, much different than now. I was this little ball-playing kid who beat all the girls and most of the boys in the popular games of the day, which were ping pong, marbles, bowling, yo-yo. I remember being the yo-yo champion, the district yo-yo champion of my neighborhood, and cherished the diamond-studded, I thought, yo-yo that I won. It cost big money in those days, 60 cents. Sports took up most of my non-homework time after elementary school, and playing with girls was rare, though I did have some good gal pals. And I guess I played with them board games and house, which didn't compare in my mind with box baseball and curveball played on the city streets of New York. Now, my story wouldn't be complete without my introducing you to my decade older sister. She was so very important to me. A professional model, my own role model. I knew she was very sexy. In fact, I think it may have been this particular bathing suit she's wearing in this fashion ad photo that was handed down to me when I was 14. Oh, how I loved that bathing suit. Of course, I had to stuff the bra of the suit with nylon stockings to fill it out. I idolized her and thought she was every bit as beautiful as the prime movie star of the day. Remember who that is, or have you heard of Marilyn Monroe? It was Marilyn who was flaunted everywhere as the ideal female, the role model for what every girl and woman in my circle should want to be. This was the culture, the circle and times in which I was brought up. And it needs to be seen as the backdrop for my life's journey, my resource material, if you will. It was Marilyn and my sister who informed my teenage goals and desires and spurred me on to have my hair with one side forward and one side back, movie style. It was Marilyn and my sister who represented what I should aspire to as an adult at the midpoint of the 20th century. So with this background, it came as a real surprise to me when I first found myself in bed with a woman. She was 2 decades my senior, a returning Queens College student, and we both were sophomores in an Education 101 class. We played tennis together almost every day after school, even in winter when we drove to a local public tennis court, taking from the back of her car a tennis net and a shovel so we could remove snow from the court. We had sex before I knew what the term homosexual meant. She and I shuddered to think we might actually be homo. In my circle, that word was used only in hushed tones and in jokes such as, my mother made me a homosexual. Oh, if I give her the wool, will she make me one too? We thought that was so funny. We became extremely worried and decided that she would ask her shrink if what we were doing was that. We waited anxiously to hear his answer. No, he said, don't call it homosexual. Maybe for therapeutic reasons, I don't know. Allowing us to heave this huge sigh of relief and continue our betting each time we met. I was just so naive in those days. There was an enormous amount of stigma attached to the word homosexual, and we heard it was even listed as a mental disease by the Psychiatric Association. The word gay wasn't used much, and lesbian was hardly mentioned at all, even by December 14, 1987, when this episode of The Golden Girls was airing.
For starters, Gina's a lesbian. I mean, I've never known any personally, but isn't Danny Thomas one?
Not Lebanese ones. Lesbian.
Lesbian. Lesbian. Lesbian. Isn't that where one woman and another?
We already know what it means.
Jean thinks she's in love with Rose. Jean has the hots for Rose. I think Jean would prefer Rose over me. That's ridiculous.
It's pretty.
Now you tell me the truth. If you had to pick between me and Rose, who would you pick?
Put yourself together.
Does Rose know?
No.
If she finds out Danny Thomas is a lesbian, it'll break her heart.
So in 1962, 25 years before this episode aired on TV, my life as a college sophomore compared to today was like living on another planet. Even with homophobia still around today and perhaps making an unfortunate political comeback these days, many people are now open to and accepting of non-binary folks. So fast forward with me now to my finally comprehending, that what we were doing was indeed homosexual, a word I knew only uttered in deep derision. My shame then was visceral and intense. I believed I now joined those who were the most loathed inhabitants on earth. I began recording my feelings with sketches in a diary and wrote, I must tell no one. I must hide it from every living person I know. I'm totally despicable. Some of these faces I'm drawing look back at me with disdain, even disgust. I have to make sure they can't see me. But no, that's not enough. I don't want even the potential of being seen. Here my notes on the left top corner confirm that I came out to my sister and brother-in-law on June 20th, 1987, 6 months before the episode of The Golden Girls. To me, the imaginary face to the right looked stern and displeased. So turning the face to profile was helpful, I thought, but not enough. I have to leave the eyes out altogether, I wrote. I must begin just below the eyes. I've written a draft for a picture book about my shame, and I'm currently seeking a publisher. So if you know of one, let me know. Was I averting the gaze, as we say in today's lingo, the gaze of my own drawings and paintings staring critically back at me? I had to be sure that none of these faces had the means to see me, this me that was so very bad. Obsession took over, and I saw profiles everywhere, in clouds, trees, buildings, textures, cracks in the sidewalk. I was impelled to draw and paint myriad profile forms in every configuration. I made notes to myself in these diaries, questioning, what am I doing? Where will my experiments go from here? I don't want to miss any variation that comes to mind. Sometimes my drawings included just parts of the nose, lips, and chin in every form I could think of, until it all morphed into what was an idealized form for me, one that I felt had a certain presence and power, a large, strong, abstracted nose with absolutely the perfect arc and angle, merging just so with soft, sensuous lips, curvilinear chin, strapping neck, and what became an expansive landscape for the shoulder, which sometimes continued onto another totally abstract canvas, the second part of a diptych. I wanted to project an image of profile and shoulder soaring above a vast swath of land, as huge and all-encompassing as possible. I'm reminded now how much pain I felt as I struggled with my sexuality. Each of the 28 diaries I've now completed detail the ups and downs of my sexual life and evolving womanhood. My art and writing reflected everything. It showed that I was a budding feminist and activist with a longing to write and record my journey, to let it all hang out on the page in order to relieve my stress. And you know, it did relieve my stress. It always had the effect of calming my nerves, easing my depression, and helping me feel less lonely and helpless. It's a bit weird rereading these diaries now, so many years later, to see such angst in my life and to see on paper how being a pencil person soothed my anxiety as I modified and perfected, in my mind at least, versions of the profile over and over again. I eventually even decided to make a set of guidelines, as I called them, as if others could see my process and learn how to do it themselves. I was very careful to explain the angle and kind of line I wanted. I wrote, the nose begins with a fast line at a 75 to 80-degree angle. That's how specific I was. It starts dark and fades away. The point of the pencil barely touches the paper at the nose's tip. Oh, the sensuality of it all. The curve of the chin begins as dark as possible, then fades in a sweeping movement. These were my rules for making profiles, and I followed them faithfully. That is until such time as I needed to reach beyond them. I created my profiles in series, and they're easy to follow on my website, with titles that included identifiers such as the Profile Sketch series, the Profile Solid series, Profile Writing, Marbleized, Fringed, Compartmentalized, Notation, Letter, the Profile Palette series. And here I would use the palette paper itself to form a new profile after mixing colors on it for other paintings in progress. The Profile Daubed series, Profile Landscape. Here's another diptych. I so enjoyed making one side entirely abstract and the other side conforming to my profile rules. The Profile Flying series. At times, these looked like birds in the air, but my focus was always on homing in on this idealized form coming from deep within. When I got to the Profile Envelope series, I unfolded actual envelopes, refolded them, and drew them with profile writing for addresses and squiggly lines or shading for stamps. Until the sculptor in me took over and another series began, which had profile writing in combination with my idea of alphabet letters. I don't know if you could see this. In this case, it was made from coral found on the beach, and this construction is called All Letters Rest on a Baseline. Soon bent nails and found objects were replacing profile parts, and shells and small stones were included in what I called missives. I kept the format of a written letter with date at the upper right, salutation, as if it were Dear Ms. Jones with comma, identifications for paragraphs, and signature at the end. This kind of work continued for a long time until I was asked by the curator of an exhibition called Bad Girls to make the most outrageous sculpture I could think of. And I was launched on a new journey with the machete blade as focus. For me, the machete blade became a symbol of protection and power. I published newspaper and journal articles with the title, "My Blades Are My Bodyguards." In some exhibitions, the sculptures hung and swayed gently from the ceiling with almost invisible cords. Many viewers didn't notice the machetes until they came up really close. Then in 2001, after 9/11, and running from an entire day from my ground zero studio and watching the trade towers fall, I realized how much that word protection meant to me throughout my life, and titled my next series, Nights of Protection, again making an idealized, rather androgynous figure, which sometimes included superheroes and icons of protection, highlighting especially my all-time favorite upstander, Wonder Woman. This series led to another theme I called body swapping, which included sculptural art that could be worn on the body. And now, in 2025, I'm working on a series I call Warriors Waging Peace, where the skin, I call it skin of the bodies, have specific quotes and words on them. And now the nonprofit Have Art Will Travel comes to the fore, enriching its educational programs to include upstander behavior and courageous kindness. My work includes many series and stories, but this will remain for another discussion at another time in the future. Thank you very much. So I guess we'll be open to questions at this point. And I'll turn it back to Karen